Hello, RantboxTV watchers. I'm here again with Ola from Ola's Cool Kitchen. How are you doing, Ola?
All right.
Love the jazz hands.
Jazz hands.
As per usual with our dynamic, I'm bamboozled because you're going to talk about something. I have no particular idea. I have an idea about it, but not the actual details of it. But you want to talk about a political idea to do with Star Trek Discovery, which is now on Netflix. Over to you.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you if you've seen this or you felt it as well. It's the last season where Michael, our like Spock's half sister, human sister, who's on the ship of Discovery, ends up in the future because she saved the world going into the future, and the Starfleet is gone, just decimated, in this new future, and it's all cutthroat, and everybody going around being everybody that was the former Federation, it's all lost, it's all decimated, and it's about her wanting to rebuild Starfleet and find out what happened, because there was a burn and all the warp drives, like that's what happened, there was a burn. Now here's what I would say to you, okay, like what's the modern equivalent of that? Well, the burn could be climate change. I was thinking about that, our version of climate change, or yay or nay. But Starfleet, this is talking about populism. Did you feel that? I want to ask you, did you feel that when you watched that?
I did read that. Sorry, did it go a bit fuzzy there on the old audio?
Yeah, what did you say? Yeah.
I didn't read that that populism angle into watching that episode. Like, it's currently well, this goes out, it'll probably be on episode 5 or so, but at this point we're on episode 3, and I didn't really get that. But it was talking to me about the idealism that makes the Federation what it is, in terms of having a certain set of codes and ideas that keep people in line, that make sure that everything's fair. And in this new future, that doesn't exist. My issue with that, as you know, other maybe old Trekkers might have it as well, is that if you don't have that in the show, then are you watching Star Trek, or are you watching a kind of generic sci-fi show where you've got some characters who are aware of the Star Trek lore, and they have the idea of what it used to be? It's not really in play. So I'm not sure if I'm really getting Star Trek. Though, to go real devil's advocate on this, essentially, if you don't have that, then you do have a show which is examining Star Trek from the point of view in a very post-structuralist sense in that way. Because you don't have like a ship of all these nice people, like, you know, solving problems. You've got many different ships with all these different problems trying to get back to what it is that we saw in the original show with Kirk, or even in Deep Space Nine, or in Next Generation. So that just shows you how I haven't eaten today. I'm so actually buzzed out of it. But yeah, that's what I saw.
Very interesting, but I look at it this way. The original Star Trek was created by Gene Roddenberry, and it was created in the TV series was created in the 60s. And at that point in time, we were different people in the 60s. And it was this optimism, you know, like we will have to join forces. And it was a very liberal time as well. That's where this was coming from, but it was a vision, like seeing, like it was looking at equality between not only men and women, but of beings, other beings, and an ability and a place where people can, where you will be allowed to shine and not be restricted by your blue, whatever, blue, you know what I mean? Like, and you could say, well, those blue guys, like for example, like Spock was, you know, the other. Many of, like, half Vulcan, half human. He didn't fit in. You could relate it to the immigrant experience to America at the time. You could relate it to anybody who's an outsider. You can relate him to, you know, to me, he's like a rock and roll musician, Spock. He's the outsider. He's the original outsider. You know, that's why you loved him as he battled. I'm an immigrant to America, so I really related to the Spock character. I could, where people would look at you in America and say, "You're not, I don't accept you. You're an immigrant." I mean, I had that. English is not my first language. It's and my parents talked funny. You know what I mean? Like, people would look down at you. They would also underestimate you. They just look at you as less than human. Anyway, I got off the track there, but what now? You see, we're still Star Trek. This is why I would say to you, well, I might disagree with the idea that it's not Star Trek, because we're just living in a time where that idealistic place, the United Nations, NATO, whatever you want to call it, is being threatened. And it's also talking just got a bit of a particular American slant, but you can apply it to other countries as well, because with Trump, you had an isolationism. And with Brexit, this is about isolationism. That somehow you'll be so much, your identity will be so much stronger if you didn't have all these other people, with their smelly foods and their different ways.
Can I ask
Instead of actually working. Sorry, yes.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Essentially, and I hear that my audio is really, really strange. We have two different paths that we can take, right? As geeks, we can either use a franchise to hold on to as a nostalgia idea of our past and say, hey, don't threaten this. Or we can have that franchise wrap itself around the cultural concerns of our time. So that is, I posit, the issue that many trekkers will have with Discovery, in that they really want Path A to be something that is seen as this powerful thing, don't mess with it. When ironically, Path B is what the show always was. It was a commentary on its time and what the future could be. So my issues maybe with Discovery, which I have to say, they're not as heavy-handed as those who do ascribe themselves to Part A, even though I suppose I'm a Part A person, is because I'm not watching the show just because I like commentary on various different idealism. I just want to kind of escape the now. As we talk, this video exists in the world where either Biden or Trump has become president, and so even nightmare is happening as we speak. I would like to watch Star Trek to kind of avoid some of that nightmare. So am I wrong in doing so? Is it something that you want to have a particular opinion on?
There's nothing wrong with you wanting to escape, but I mean, I don't know how you watch the first original Star Trek and like totally escape, because that was always, like you said, there's always been if you're going to say original Star Trek was always about commentary about. So did you not remember when Captain Kirk kisses Uhura? That was the first interracial kiss on TV. And how can you not get it? And also, Uhura is one of the first African-American, she was a very important person to be on television. This is like a breakthrough when you see her on there. She's majestic, she's beautiful. And, I've read stuff about Nichelle Nichols, how people it was all on, there's this commentary about African-American and brown people having to like represent their race to white people and all this kind of stuff. But that's what she had to do. She was on there to show the rest of America something different. And there's even a Star Trek episode where it's about racial hatred, and the guys, the very early 60s episode, where one of the reason why they hate each other, one face is black and one face is white, right? And the other guy, it's the same, but it's reverse. And that's why they hate each other, because it's the different side of the face. Racism is being discussed. I mean, okay, maybe you can escape more because it was a bit panto and a bit ridiculous with this. Maybe the phasers and the noises are because it's all, but
then I have to ask, do we have an opportunity for these shows to be not only more nuanced, but maybe attack some of the bigger issues that do have a way of becoming insidious in our society. Like, I can't think of a sci-fi episode of the show or any other show where they deal with economics being like a major contributor to problems. I mean, sure, you've got the Ferengi in the Next Generation, but ultimately, when it comes to addressing economics as an issue, or taking any ideas that, say, Noam Chomsky or other pundits have, sci-fi shows don't really communicate that. Either they don't think that we'll find it interesting, or they think that showing off the mythology or the lore of those different worlds is what the people that are in that tract of A want to see. So how much can they really deliver on that as an idea? I get what you're saying about the old Star Trek, but even then, we're watching that retrospectively. I wasn't there in the 60s to watch it as it happened, you know? So like many other people, I'm taking on board how important it was in retrospect.
Well, you have to, like, excuse me, because I wasn't there to originally watch it either, but I read a lot of Trek books. I've read a lot of Buffy books, and I've read a lot of Trek books, and I've read about the impact of the show and contextualized it. I actually find it fascinating to read books about how these programs are like an interpretation of the society at the time. That's how geeky I am. Yeah, so that's why I know about. I wasn't born when Star Trek came out. So original Star Trek came out, but I'm aware of the impact because I read all this stuff about it, and I read Nichelle Nichols because she was cool. It's like, hey, she's like an icon, and I think it would be very difficult to comment on the this is a 1 hour show, and it is about, like you said, a certain amount of entertainment. So you have to.
That's kind of what I want to address. How far can they take that initial idea of saying, hey, this is a fantastical event show, and we're going to discuss some humanistic situations, some cultural situations, and we're going to show how, if we're in this void of this other time, how we could reach better conclusions if we work together. But we've seen season upon season of racial, issues through the Klingons or the Vulcans and whoever. But if we are going to really use that show as a commentary, then perhaps, as you just said, because they've only got a small amount of time, maybe it's not really a facilitator for what maybe people who are in Tract B really need to get out of the show. Maybe Star Trek only has so far it can boldly go.
Look, man, I watch a lot of sci-fi and a lot of just tons of it. Doctor Who is highly political, has lots of messages it's getting out there. New Doctor Who, but old Doctor Who had them too. I mean, they're interspersed in the stories. And whatever. Supergirl got very political after Trump got. I mean, this is a bit more popcorn, but there was a character who they really went for the immigrants. Like, they had this interesting thing in Supergirl where they just they were started a turn on the heroes because they were aliens from another planet, and Earth was going against them. And there's one scene where there's a Mexican character where her daughter's a superhero, but is Mexican. And like, they hate people like us. This is Supergirl. It's quite kiddie. And then suddenly there was some interesting, like, bam, Supergirl. Wow. I know there was a speech where I almost cried when they had this Earth First kind of person come in and do this shit, because it was speaking to us. And I honestly, you can't help but talk about what's going on at the time in something. And I think Star Trek can't. That's what Star Trek always did. And what I thought was really interesting was she goes into the future, because I've been watching it, and I was like, when I was been watching Star Trek was about optimism. Star Trek was about hope. And the 60s was about that liberal time where it was about choice and opportunity, so you can be the best you. That's how I saw, and infinite diversity, like the whole thing of like infinite IDIC, infinite combinations or infinite diversity. I can't remember what it's called, but we get great pleasure from diversity. Not from. Okay, I think that's a Vulcan thing. I don't know, but anyway.
Yeah, it's a Vulcan thing.
It's a Vulcan thing, right? But IDIC or infinite, I can't remember it's been a while since I've read. I was a teenager when I read a lot of this stuff. But what I'm trying to say to you now is, here we are, and we have to like, each series of this Discoveries dealt with something else, and if you want retro, we had Spock in the last series and Pike. They brought Christopher Pike. If you want, that was great. I was like, yeah, because I'm that kind of a geek. I know who Christopher Pike is, and I know what happened to him, So I was like, yeah, and I loved it. I love the retro. I wish Doctor Who would revisit its roots more instead of just being totally new. I'd like a little bit of throwback more. But anyway, what happens is now we're going to explore. Well, let's look at what happens with populism. Let's look at what happens to us when we cut ourselves off, when we don't speak to each other, when we don't have that vision of idealism. Because this is what this is. The Starfleet, to me, like you got the people who are real Star Wars fans. I'm not against Star Wars, but I'm not a big Star Wars fan, but they're the Force. And there's the Force, and it's interesting. It's kind of like this pseudo or kind of like spiritualist kind of thing, and everything. It's also like Douglas Adams. Everything's connected. Everything that's alive is connected. It's very hippie in some ways. But Star Trek is a little bit less hippie with Starfleet, but there's a code. And it's a very liberal 60s code of against racism, against whatever gender discrimination. And it is about and also understanding different cultures and managing them, and not just hating somebody else, whether it's another person or another alien, that there's another perspective that we need to know. And that we are reasonable beings that can navigate, but we need to work together. And we can still keep our own identities without having to resort to populism. And that's why I was particularly interested when I got hooked into the Discovery thing, because I realized here we're going to explore the effects of this populism. And we're going to try and go back to our roots. Starfleet. When she put the uniform, I got emotional. So we're in this new universe. It stinks. It's just like killing, and she spent a year, Michael spent a year waiting for the ship to come, and she had become acclimatized to this whole thing. So, you have somebody who had to live in the populist thing and just started to embrace it. And then they came back. And it's like those values are coming back at you. Yeah. And she's reunited, and she got all the dreads, changed her hair, but as soon as she put that uniform on and put that, I'm not patriotic. I couldn't give a shit about the British flag or the American flag. But when I see that little communicator, and I see that uniform, because I know that is my ethos. That is where I want to be. That's what I want to see the future as. Something positive, something that isn't about limitations, and it's about understanding and communication and allowing for differences while also maintaining oneself.
Sure. I think there will be something that happens to me in terms of my enjoyment of the show as it proceeds. Maybe it just needs a bit more time, but I can't help but feel that what I do like getting out of something which is, say, forward thinking, is being done better on other shows, like The Boys, for instance, because they're quite happy they're quite happy they're quite happy to talk about the meta contextual analysis that happens when we talk about products that can affect people and branding and celebrity and whatnot. At the risk of promoting my own book, I'm not averse to writing about fantastical characters, but dealing with how they have to socially interact despite the pressure that they may get from ideas of what they're supposed to be through other media. And I don't know if Star Trek Discovery truly wants to work through the idea of media in their universe. There is no show that everyone watches in Star Trek Discovery. There is no pushes or pushing of capitalistic ideals through branding or entertainment. And I think maybe I can be accused of looking to Star Trek to do something that it doesn't know how to do or isn't interested in. That all being said, this is a fascinating topic, and I want to return to it at another time, but we've kind of run out of time. At least I've run out of time now. But this is the thing, Ola. I know you're going to want to rant about it, and that's great.
No. One thing I want to say. One thing.
And that one thing, really short. Okay.
Very short. I promise. I want to say thank you. You're so cerebral. I love it. But boys, one thing I want to say about boys. There's a scene where there's a female one of the super people, and she turns out to be an old Nazi, right? Have you seen it? This is a spoiler, guys. Spoilers. If you haven't watched Boys, don't listen. So she turns out to be from the old Nazi party, and there's a point where they confront her, and and she says, "I'm selling what America wants. They just don't like the word Nazi." Oh, so on the nose. But the best bit, spoiler, don't watch this, is when all the girls, the women, beat her up and kick her. That was great, because that's what you should do with the Nazi. I'm not a soft hippie. I'm not a soft hippie, really. The best Nazi is a dead Nazi. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Again, we're celebrating and are happy to see that a show can do that in the context of there being capes and powers and whatnot. And even though Star Trek isn't a superhero show, it is a fantastical show that does, through its history, suggest that it wants to have a lot of things to say about how we interact with each other, and that whole thing you were saying before about inclusion and diversity. So I kind of want Discovery to really go further with that, but explore an aspect of humanity that so far it hasn't really truly pushed, and that would be media. But yes, we have run out of time. Please do plug your Ola's Cool Kitchen DJ show. What is it about? Where can people check it out?
It's a journey through both time and space. It's kind of guitar based, but it's all over the place. And it is eclectic, and good music has no boundaries. That's an ethos. You can find it on Mixcloud, SoundCloud, Automatic Speaker, Stitcher, iTunes.
Excellent. You were great. And I sounded like a Dalek throughout most of this episode, but that's fine.
No, you were great. Now, I was really happy that we were able to, it's not just you.
Oh, no, I mean the actual audience.
Not just me. Sorry, not just me. I mean, what I meant to say is not just you, asking questions. It's more fun to.
Oh, indeed, for sure. Thank you so much for watching RantboxTV, viewers. We do a new episode every Friday, and I'm sure Ola will join us again on another episode. Goodbye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.